Okay, everyone. So we are here with today's talk. You may settle down for it and say sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Katame cha te bhikkave cha Aparihaniyadhamma na basaramati. Dear Venerable Sister, dear Dhamma friends, so today we are joining with the Dhamma talk for the second day, and we have another interesting aspect that we can discuss. Now you might remember that yesterday Buddha was talking about how we can non-decline in this life, how we can progress in this life. So he is suggesting us that we should be avoiding certain things. And today we are coming to the second aspect of it. Now, let's say in order to explain this one, we might have to think about our usual ways. When we usually spend some time, well, let's say when we get together with our friends, we keep talking non-stop. It's in a way, it's a sign that we are having a good time. We get together with certain people and we talk with them. They share their thoughts, opinions, and we share our thoughts, opinions. That way, we are spending time with them. So you can see we talk a lot, and we are used to this behavior. When we are with comfortable people, we keep talking. It's like we can't even stop talking. We continue, we explain certain things, we talk. Right? So this talking you can see that we do with a lot of people. And let's say when we go to certain environments, you can feel that there are a lot of noises in those environments. Certain occasions like traveling in a city, you might hear a lot of noises, lot of people talking, working. So all those noises are there. And sometimes if you spend so much time in such places, you end up with a headache. Those things happen, right? And in other ways, even the practice, even the Dhamma, most people, they try to explain it a lot. Talking about Dhamma, all the preachings, all the ceremonies, they make a lot of noises. I remember we were doing a retreat during the past weekend, and nearby temple, there was some kind of a puja. So throughout the day, whole day, loudspeakers making noises. Although it is about, certain Dhamma aspects or Dhamma desanas, although it is about certain teachings or suttas of Buddha, these loudspeakers, they were making noises throughout the weekend. So all the meditators, they were kind of irritated. Even I myself, I felt that it was tiring due to that non-stop talking, non-stop sounds that they were making. So in this new world, in this new age, most people think that if they make the loudest noises, then they can attract many people. That's the very idea. Sometimes they keep talking, keep non-stop talking. And by talking, they feel that they can attract other people. They make noises through the loudspeakers, and they say they can attract many devotees through that process. Right? So whenever we go to such noisy environments, we feel certain irritation. We feel that we should go to a quieter environment. Even being with somebody who talks non-stop, sometimes you get sick of this person because that person is talking non-stop. There is no break, right? So that type of world we live in. Sometimes we feel that the world is too much, too overwhelming due to these noises, right? So this time, as the second aspect, Buddha is pointing towards talking. And he says that, as I mentioned earlier, the Pali terms, katamecha te bhikkavecha Aparihaniyadhamma. What bhikkhus are the 6 qualities that lead to non-decline. And today we are discussing the second one, na bassaramata. Na bassaramata means not taking delight in talk. That's the second aspect Buddha is mentioning. He's saying, if you take delight in talk, then that is not good. That will make you decline in life. If you want to progress in life, if you want to make yourself more peaceful, then you shouldn't be taking delight in talk. That's the very idea he's trying to convey. Now let's say in our usual lives, we have been making noises, we have been talking a lot. But by coming here, entering this retreat, in a way we try to maintain certain silence. That's in the guidelines. You should minimize your talking. That's the very idea. And even the environment, it is supporting that silence. When you come to a forest, there are little noises, maybe nature sounds, maybe animal noises. Those things are not that irritating. So you can see the environment is more peaceful, and even ourselves, we try to maintain a certain level of silence. You can't stay like a mute. Probably that's not the case. But you minimize your talking. If somebody comes and asks, where is the bathroom? You can answer. Don't be reluctant to answer that. But we try to minimize the unnecessary chatter. That's the very idea. So by coming to a retreat, by coming to a forest, we have accepted a certain level of silence. Right? So that's the very idea. So although you accepted it, although you try to keep the silence, sometimes it is too hard because we have trained ourselves to talk non-stop. And especially when there are no distractions in the surrounding, then you feel like talking all the time. You feel like that you should say something in order to get rid of that awkward silence. Right? So that type of urge comes from within. Most of the yogis, they struggle with this idea. They prefer to be silent, but they can't do it. There's this urge to talk. They get to their rooms, they keep chatting. Throughout the night, maybe with the other yogis, they are chatting. Right? So in a way, you have to be patient towards them. Because for a beginner, it is difficult to accept this. No distractions in the surrounding. Now only the talking is the remaining distraction. And we keep talking, we keep making noises. But the very idea is to maintain your mindfulness. And when you maintain your mindfulness, you are even making lesser noises. When you do certain activities, if you are unmindful, then you might make a lot of noises. But when you do things mindfully, you in a way try to minimize your noise pollution. Now even remember the first day we were giving guidelines towards the practice. And initially you just stood up. No request was made. You simply stood up in your natural way, probably making lot of noises. But when you sat down, the instructions were to sit down mindfully. And when you listen to yourself, when you direct your attention towards yourself, you realize you are making less noises. In a way, it helps with the noise pollution as well. But where even the mindful practitioners, sometimes they feel like talking. Mindfully, we try to minimize the talking, but that is not always successful. But little by little, we try to accept the idea of Buddha. He is saying that we shouldn't be taking delight in talking. You can talk when necessary, but you shouldn't be taking delight in it. That's the very idea, right? So gradually, we can develop the ability to maintain the silence. That ability, gradually you have to develop. Initially it is difficult. Initially you feel this urge to talk. And when you start talking, you feel like you are talking for many hours. That's how it works. But little by little, when you become a seasoned practitioner, you start to make less noises, as well as you start to keep the silence, right? So that you need to give it some time. If you are a beginner, it is natural that you feel this urge to talk, right? Even some seasoned practitioners, some familiar yogis, they also struggle with this talking part. And most of the time when we talk, we are not mindful. We simply get carried away with those thought processes. So it's a gradual process. It takes time for you to, find the proper balance, but it's worth it. Initially you try to suppress the talking. You feel like you are somehow staying mute. Even some other people get irritated because you are not answering or you are not talking, right? But you have to find the proper balance. It is not the unnecessary talking which is taking delight in talking. That's not the thing, but you can't stay like a mute. Especially when you are in this type of retreat, a group retreat, certain occasions you have to reply, you have to talk. So you have to find the proper balance of talking. It shouldn't be so much of a burden to you. Maybe staying mute shouldn't be so much of a burden to you. Maybe answering some question shouldn't be too much of a burden to you. So we try to find that proper balance. It takes time, it takes effort, but it's worth it. Now there's this very nice Zen story about talking. They are, I think, 4 monks. They got together at a evening time and they decided to meditate throughout the night. They decided that we will not talk, we will stay mute, and we will try to meditate throughout the night. That was their determination. And initially, they lit up a oil lamp and they started their meditation. Now the night falls and the oil lamp is about to die. So this one monk, he was seeing this oil lamp. He thought that I should do something about this. I should correct this, otherwise we can't meditate in the darkness. So this person talked to some other person that was nearby and said, Mister, please adjust this oil lamp. Put some oil in it. So that was the first monk. Then the second one was saying, now look what you did. You talked. Our determination was not to talk, right? The second monk was saying. Then the third monk was saying, Now see, finding his fault, you also talk no. Right? That's the third one. Then the fourth one is saying, I am the only one that didn't talk. Right? So that's how the talking works. You can really see it's like, you get caught without even knowing. You feel like you are staying mute, but at least you have to say, I'm the only one that didn't talk. Right? So that type of attitude we have towards talking, it comes like an urge. And you don't even know that you are talking so much. You are not even mindful that you are talking so much. So that happens. But it takes time, it takes some effort. Gradually you can figure out the proper balance. It's not like staying like a mute. That's not the way. In the other extreme, probably talking non-stop. That's also not the way. You know when to talk and you know when to stay silent. That's the very idea. Now let's say you come to a retreat and you probably sit in meditation. Yes? And you sit, you close your eyes. Now it feels like you are not talking. Right? You have your eyes closed, you sit in meditation. Are you really silent when it comes to that position? You are not talking, you sit in meditation and you have your eyes closed. Right? Are you really silent? That's the question that we have to ask. Right? In this practice, Buddha says the talking goes much deeper. It's not like, you are staying mute with your mouth. That's not the only talking that happens. Instead, there are many layers of talking. Right? So let's say you probably are staying silent, but inside you have much chatter. Right? It is called probably inner chatter. You can use that word, or otherwise we say commentary. Right? So that type of a inner chatter is there. And for some people it is so noisy. Right? Especially when it comes to a retreat like this, especially when you try to keep the silence, you start to notice this inner chatter. Especially the meditators, when they try to become mindful, they realize their mind is so noisy. For some people, their inner chatter is quite negative. They have negative inner chatter. And it is not good for them. When they have a negative inner chatter, they always try to find faults. They always see fear in whatever the things that are happening. It is more like an addiction. You are addicted to this negative inner chatter. So it's a good idea to be mindful and really know what type of inner chatter you have. If it is too negative, then that's a sign that your mind is negatively biased. Whatever happens, you see only the faults in them. Even the family members, no matter how much they do, you will always find some fault. The world, whatever that happens in this world, you won't see any good in them. Instead, you will say that although this happened this way, this mistake was done. Or it was not completed perfectly. That type of a negative attitude might be there in your inner chatter. And what happens is that if you have that type of a negative attitude, then naturally your world becomes negative. It doesn't matter whatever that's there in the outside. It doesn't matter how good the other people are. You will always find fault in them. You will always find fault in the outside world. So it's a really good idea to be mindful, to be aware of what type of inner chatter you have. Is it always about finding faults? Is it always about complaining? If that type of inner chatter you have, then you should do something about it. Otherwise, you will always find fault in this world. No matter how the other people are, you will never be happy. Right? So that happens. So it's a really good idea to be mindful of your inner chatter. And gradually, when you become mindful, you can replace this negative inner chatter with the positive kind of inner chatter. That is important, right? Forget about the meditation. I'm still not talking about meditation. I'm saying that your daily mind, how it works. And if it is negatively biased, then it is not good for you, right? So in this Pollyanna story, it says that glad game. The child is talking about a glad game. And the glad game is really supporting someone to find good in some situation. If your inner chatter is really negative, then you can use the glad game to find or to replace that negative inner chatter with some positive inner chatter. It is about alternative ways of thinking, right? Some incident happen, you see only bad in it. But you force yourself to think in an alternative manner. You think in an alternative manner and try to find some positive in this situation. Right? So that's the very idea of glad game. Pollyanna says that you should be playing a glad game. If you search enough, if you search hard enough, you can always find something to be glad. That's Pollyanna's idea. And we usually go to schools and we give the instructions to the children and we ask them, now let's play a glad game. Now, your mother blamed you. And how to be glad in this situation? Right? So usually, negative kind of thoughts appear. My mother blamed me. So the children, they are thinking for a while. Initially they say, although I got blamed, my mother is blaming me to correct me. So that's something to be glad. Some children say, although I got blamed, it is by my mother. So that's something to be glad. So this way they try to think alternative ways of thinking. And if you play this game long enough, one child will say, although I got blamed, I didn't get hit, no. So that's something to be glad. Right? So that type of a glad game. Even, I think that story, it is Sunaparanta Punnahamdro. Right? A monk is talking with Buddha. He is saying that, Bhante, I am going to a faraway country. I'll go there and I'll meditate. Then the Buddha asks, where are you going? Then this monk says, I am going to Middle East. Right? Some kind of idea. Sunaparanta. That's Middle East probably. Right? Then Buddha says, those people, they might not be, so kind. They might blame you. Right? That type of people that's living in those countries. So this monkey is saying, okay, Bhante, if they blame me, I'll be glad that I didn't get hit. Then Buddha says, if you get hit, then this monkey is saying, although I got hit, I wasn't hit by sticks. So that's something to be glad. Then Buddha asks, if you get hit by sticks, then this monk says that although I got hit by sticks, I didn't get hit by weapons, swords and things like that. Then if they hit you with swords, then this monk says, although they hit me with swords, they didn't make deadly wounds. If they make deadly wounds, Then this monk says, although they make deadly wounds, they didn't kill me. If they kill you, then finally the Buddha asked. Then he says, Bhante, in this practice, so many monks are thinking about committing suicide. So if somebody else is coming and killing me, how nice, right? That's the answer he gave. Then Buddha says, you are destined to go to Middle East. Go, right? That's the conclusion. So you can see even Buddha is trying to play a glad game with him. He is asking questions, trying to see how the mind of this monk works. Right? So there are so many ways to think negatively. Of course, we are used to it. But if you are a practitioner, you should replace that type of negative thinking with a certain kind of a positive attitude. And when you do that, initially it feels like so forceful. When you try to play a glad game, if you are a negatively biased person, you really struggle to find something to be glad, right? But although it is forceful initially, when you keep practicing this, gradually you become better at it. Gradually you can find certain things to be glad in a situation. And if you practice it for many months, then you can realize that my negative inner chatter is replaced with a positive one. So you can see that although the world is out there, whether it becomes negative or positive, it's a matter of your mind. Right? If your mind has a negatively biased attitude, then whatever the world, it doesn't matter. You will see a negative world. If your mind is positively biased, then it doesn't matter what bad fortune comes towards you. You will always survive that situation thinking positively. So that approach is important, especially if your inner chatter is quite negative. You should do something about it. It takes so much time probably to replace that, but that effort is worthful. Because for decades, with ignorance, with unconsciousness, you have been energizing this negative inner chatter. Right? In your whole life probably, you have been supporting this negative inner chatter in the darkness, in the ignorance. When you practice awareness, you start to notice it. And replace it with positive inner chatter. It takes some time, it takes some effort, but it is worth it. So especially for people who are with negative inner chatter, we suggest that they should be working on it. They should be replacing it with positive inner chatter, or otherwise they should be playing a glad game frequently. Right? So that's the very idea. And let's say coming back to meditation, right? Inner chatter is another layer. You are mute in your body, but inside the mind is so noisy, right? Some people, they have voices inside them. I remember one time I was severely sick with a fever, and I could feel that there were like 3 different types of voices in me. One voice is always supportive, right? That voice is trying to, somehow manage the situation. I know you are sick, somehow we will survive. That type of a inner voice. Then another voice is cursing at everyone, cursing at everything, right? Whatever happens, cursing, blaming, that type of a voice. Then there was this third voice, more like a neutral one, right? So you can see, especially when you are sick, especially when you lose the control of your mind, feverish kind of a situation, in a certain way, you lose the control of your mind. So there are certain behaviors, certain tendencies, they arise, and you can feel these different voices in you. And when it go beyond a certain level, it is called you are probably mentally sick. There are some people that hear voices and they can't avoid listening to those voices. Especially the people who are considered as schizophrenic, they hear voices. Sometimes the very mother kills her infant child, and later she confesses saying that the voices were telling me to kill. Right? So that type of mentality is beyond control, probably needs some medication. Right? So when the inner chatter or the voices go beyond a certain level, it is too damaging, too harming. But as meditators, most of us, we see that there are certain type of inner chatter within me, but that can be manageable, and especially with meditation, it can be reduced. Right? So that type of a process we are doing. And let's say when you go even deeper, right? When we meditate, we are in a way using verbal formations. Verbal formations. Buddha says vachi sanskara. Right? For a meditator, these verbal formations, the minimum level is so important. Even for meditation, these verbal formations are supporting us. Vitakka vichara. Vitakka vichara. Vitakka is translated as initial thought. Vichara is translated as sustained thought. I'll explain simply. You direct your attention towards the breathing. Right? So that's the initial thought. You direct your attention towards it. And what happens is that you then see the details of the breath. You see that the in-breath is longer. You see that the out-breath is shorter. So that is the sustained thought, vichara. Direct your attention towards something and you see the details of it. Right? So those two works together. And it doesn't matter whatever we do. It doesn't matter wherever we go. Our mind works with these two. Initial thought and sustained thought. Let's say you hear some sound. Right? Probably a voice from somebody. And initially you direct your attention towards it. Then you see the details of that voice. And you suddenly realize that this is my mother's voice. Right? So that type of realization comes with these two. Right? So this is the minimum level of verbal formations. When it becomes stronger, it becomes inner chatter. When it becomes even more stronger, it becomes talking. Right? So you can see gradually you become silent in your body. Then you start to feel the inner chatter within you, the commentary within you. Then you direct your attention towards breathing. You feel the details of the breath. For a moment you have given up the inner chatter and now you are with the minimum level of verbal formations. The minimum level is vitakka vichara, otherwise initial thought and sustained thought. You direct your attention towards breathing and you feel the details of the breath. So you can see those two are considered as the minimum level of the verbal formations. Right? When it gets stronger, it goes into other different types. Right? So we are using these two in order to meditate as well. Now, they were used in a wrong way probably earlier. They were used to, enjoy the world. They were used to find fault with other people. They were used to search for the things that you crave. Right? So that type of vitakka vichara we had. or the initial and sustained thought we had. You go to a certain destination, you enjoy the surrounding, you listen to your music, or otherwise you talk with some person, right? All those occasions, you are using this ability of your mind in order to enjoy the surrounding, in order to see the details of it, in order to enjoy the music, all those things that you do, right? So that verbal formations were used in a wrong way earlier. Now, as meditation, we learn how to use them productively, right? That's the very idea. And for a meditator, it is very important that you direct your attention towards a certain object and you see the details of that object. Initial thought and sustained thought. And when you listen to Q&A discussions, most of the time we are asking or we are encouraging the yogis to see the details of the primary object, right? You direct your attention towards your breath and we are asking, how do you feel your breath? What is the difference between in-breath and the out-breath? Right? That type of questioning, that type of encouragement is given. Most people initially they can't figure it out. They don't get that sustained thought path. Vichara part they don't get. Right? So initial thought is there, but you can't keep your attention with that object because vichara is missing. Right? But gradually you have to, encourage them to observe the details of that object. When they observe, it becomes easier for you to maintain your mind there. You have to give this mind a task. What is the task given? To observe the details of the primary object. By observing the details of the primary object, we correct our thoughts or correct our verbal formations. Vitakka vichara is now properly used, not in a wrong way. Right? So that encouragement is given. I remember one time I was sitting with a person and he was simply doing his sitting session. So I was asking him, what did you notice? Did you notice the breathing? And then he said, yes, Bhante, I am noticing the breath. Then I asked him whether you could notice the difference between the in-breath and the out-breath. Then he said, yes, I am noticing the difference between in-breath and the out-breath. Then I asked him, what was the difference? Then this fellow was thinking for a while and he said, in-breath is less polluted, out-breath is more polluted. He's talking about sciences, that carbon dioxide matter, right? So he can't think about how to observe the details of this primary object. He think about some valuable details from the science book, right? That type of attitude we have. But for the meditators, we say you should be encouraged to observe the details of the breath. By observing it, you are using this vitakka vichara in a correct manner. You are letting go of all the other inner chatter, thoughts and those things. Right? So that it takes some effort, but gradually, little by little, people become good at approaching this primary object and observing the details of it. Right? And little by little you see that you say that I am able to observe few breath cycles now. These are the changes between the in-breath and the out-breath. And some people are even saying, when I observe breath for a while, I can see that my breath is changing. Right? That step they will notice. So you can see, we used this initial and sustained thought, the verbal formations, the minimum level for our meditation. Right? Gradually we see that the breath is changing. Gradually we see that this is how it is changing. And let's say you do it for a while and one day you realize the breath disappears. You were noticing the breath, you were seeing the details, And going into the sitting session, you realize the breath disappears. Right? At that moment, what happens to vitakka vichara? What happens to initial and sustained thought? That is something very important. Right? Now, probably for the first time, you are experiencing a certain level of silence. You have experienced silence in your body, but there was so much noise inside. Then you have experienced silence by directing your attention towards the breath, but still the verbal formations were there, the minimum level, vitakka vichara. But when the breath disappears, naturally those two are also disappearing. For a moment, for a while, you can feel that the vitakka vichara is not there. Right? The breath is not there. And you feel utterly peaceful. Some people, when they are experiencing it for the very first time, they say that they felt like cloud 9. They felt like in heaven. Why? Probably for the very first time in their life, they are experiencing the silence. Right? That experience is unique. That experience is life-changing. But again, what happens is that the breath appears. Again, the verbal formations appears. Right? Again, you can feel the in-breath, out-breath. But don't get discouraged. That is natural. Again, the verbal formations appear. Then the inner chatter appear. Maybe you get up from the sitting and go and talk to somebody. Right? The talking appears. Right? So you can see those levels again get manifested. But for the first time, maybe you have experienced a certain level of silence. So that's a good thing. You should be glad about it. Right? Again, the noises appear. But that's okay. Now you are in the path, no? Now you know how to meditate and experience that silence. That is what matters. Most yogis, they get addicted to that silence. And they start hating the noises. Right? Especially the seasoned yogis. They do the fault finding, saying that this person is talking too much. They will say the surrounding is too noisy. These kitchen people are talking so loudly. Right? So those type of complaints come because they get addicted to that silence. They prefer if everything is silent. Right? But you can't find it in this world. Now, due to the practice, you have experienced this silence. You can be glad about it. But this world is with noises. Right? So it's okay. You come back to the world. You talk to other people. You deal with them. Again, you go back to a meditation session. And again, you experience that type of silence. How the vitakka vichara, or initial and sustained thought, it is disappearing. Right? For a while, the breath disappears. Then you can see certain mental images come. Right? Most of the time, these mental images, you don't have that initial thought. It is more like a sustained thought. Without the vitakka, vichara is working. You start to feel certain kind of like images, certain faces, certain lights, all those type of things come into your mind. Alright, so that process, it is more like, hidden certain things are coming to the surface. You can see you are not directing your mind towards that object, but somehow you get to see the details of it. Maybe it is a glimpse. It don't last for a while. You don't have to go hunt for it. Don't go search for it. Instead, it will appear, it will show some details and it will disappear. Right? And these mental images, these faces, these colors, you shouldn't be assigning any value towards them. Don't assign any value towards them. Some people say you see a face and they start thinking, who is this person? Probably they'll figure out this is my great-great-grandfather, right? And they will start a whole new process trying to, pass merits towards that grandfather. He's looking after me. All those kind of nonsense come, right? So don't assign any value to these pictures, these images. Don't assign any value to these colors that appear, right? Instead, it is a part of the process, more like a dust, right? When it is a dust, you don't assign any value to it. Just let it come and go, right? That type of approach you have to have. And let's say now you know or you have experienced the silence. Due to the support of meditation, you have experienced the silence for a while. But that silence is not permanent, right? That's the case. Now, in order to find the real silence, you might have to function or you might have to meditate for a longer period. But due to the meditation, now you know how silence feels like. You have a newfound appreciation towards silence. Earlier you were appreciating noises. You thought that the truth is with the noises. But now, due to the practice, you have a newfound appreciation towards the silence, and probably when you hear noises, you know that there is no truth there. Right? So that change will happen in your life. And there's this very nice Japanese concept that is called ma. That term, ma, is used for the interval or the space, right? That's the very idea. Some people, they define it as silence. That's not the case. Instead, it says that space or the interval between things, right? For example, let's say when we are talking to someone, if we only know the noises, if we only value the noises, then probably I am not so convincing to the other person. The great speakers, they use the space or the interval between words to communicate their message effectively. Right? You can see how they play with the silence. They wait for a while for the idea to sink in, and then they start talking. Right? Even the world-renowned musicians, they use silence. It's not always about playing an instrument. Instead, they use silence more effectively. Right? They play a certain part, then they allow that part to sink into the silence. Right? That type of a play they do with the silence. So let's say we are talking to somebody, we are playing music, whatever we do, it's good to have certain space or interval between things. If it is noises, let's say you create certain space in between them. So that is considered as classical music or something like that. If it is words, you create a certain gap in between them. And you are considered as an effective communicator. Right? If it is even, let's say, your room or your home, there should be some space between the things that you have. If it is too crowded, then you don't feel comfortable there. Right? All the chairs, all the cushions and everything, it's full of stuff. Then you might not feel comfortable. So they play with this space, they play with this interval. So that's the very idea of this Japanese concept of ma. So you can see it has a newfound appreciation towards the silence. Not only the noises, not only the words, but the silence is also appreciated. Right? Even let's say an interval or a space between thoughts. You feel much more comfortable in your mind. If it is too noisy, if it is too crowded, then you don't feel comfortable there. That's why most people, they hate retreats, because they are with bad company. They are with themselves and you don't feel comfortable there. You feel something ugly is there in their mind. Right? So you can see that there is no gap between the thoughts. There is no gap between the things that they experience. So they feel utter chaos in them. I remember one boy, he was residential here for like 3 weeks or so. He was diagnosed with some kind of a mental disease. He didn't know. He was just taking medicine. And he was repetitively saying every day while we do some certain work, and while doing them, he was saying, Bhante, I feel so much noise, so many thoughts inside me. It feels like utter chaos and I am suffering a lot. Due to that mental illness or due to the status of his mind, that mind is too crowded. He is suffering due to that. He feels pain. He feels suffering due to the crowded mind. And he was struggling to stay, but somehow he managed to stay for 3 weeks. That's a huge thing for him. While taking medicine for that disease, he was doing the retreats. So you can see such a person, although they are mute in their body, in their mind they have so much noise, no interval between the thoughts, all the voices are hurting them, and you can't imagine their level of suffering. Right? Most of us, we feel that this person is fine. People who are suffering with depression, let's say mothers, they are saying that my child is fine. She is suffering. Probably she is suffering with depression. But the mother can't see because this child is quiet. But one day some incident happened and she realized that my child was depressed. Right? So, although they are silent, although they are mute, they suffer in their mind. You can't imagine their level of suffering. So you can see how many noises in our mind, many thoughts in our mind, how it can hurt us, how it can sometimes even destroy our life, sometimes even take our life. Right? So that much of suffering the people they are experiencing. So in meditation, when you develop your practice, you realize there are intervals between the thoughts that come to my mind. Thoughts are still coming, but there's this new appreciation towards the silence. Sometimes I think, I plan, but after planning, there is some interval. Now let's say if you are not a meditator, you have an important presentation tomorrow. You plan your things, you create the slides and everything, you finish your work. You go to your bed early. You want to have a good night's sleep. Get ready for the presentation tomorrow. But can you sleep? Probably not. Right? You are on the bed, turning and tossing, trying to fall asleep, but the sleep is far away. Why? Still the mind is planning. Still the mind is creating presentation slides. Right? So the whole struggle is there, whole process is there. So you can see the mind, if it is too noisy, if it is full of thoughts, if there are no intervals, then it is not an easy journey for us. So the meditators, since they are experiencing the silence, since they value the silence, gradually the mind changes and you can feel there are spaces in between or the intervals in between thoughts. thinking is a tool. You can use it as a tool. But you know when to use this tool and when to keep it aside. That ability you will grow. You won't be valuing your thoughts so much. Initially, probably earlier, you were valuing your thoughts so much. You were giving so much value to them. But due to the meditation, you realize now you are no longer valuing those thoughts. And the mind feels much more peaceful because there are intervals between the thoughts. You get to experience certain intervals. Thoughts come, but there are intervals. Emotions come, but there are intervals. Surrounding things come, but there are intervals. So that's the change that happened due to the meditation. Because you have experienced the silence. But this is not the ultimate silence. Right? We are still talking about the usual way of meditation and how you can experience a certain level of silence. Probably in the coming few days, we can talk about the ultimate silence. That's something different. That's something greater. Right? We can take some time to discuss about it. But for now, I think when we experience the letting go of those verbal formations, we can feel quite peaceful. We can feel that we are at peace. That peace is not lasting, that peace is not permanent. Again, the thoughts appear again, we go and talk to someone. But that's fine. Again, after a while, you can come, sit in meditation and experience that level of silence. So this process you have to do for many rounds. You have to do for many days, many weeks, many years. And when you do it, you realize that your mind is appreciating the silence more and more. There are thoughts, but there are intervals in between them. There are emotions. Your mind works with the surrounding world, but you feel there are intervals and you are much better off. You can handle this life much easily. You can do your daily things much easily. So that's the idea. Today it's about not taking delight in talk. With that idea, we'll conclude today's Dhamma talk.